Welcome one, welcome all to the greatest mixtape of them all. This is episode 102 of the NFC East Mixtape. And as you can see, I am not RJ Ochoa, but I am joined by RJ Ochoa and Brandon Lee Gowton on today's episode. I am Raichele Privette. I am actually the producer for NFC East Mixtape. And the guys reached out to me and were like, hey, do you want to join us on a show? So I was like, why not? You know, it's Women's History Month. I was excited. I'm honored to be here, mixing things up, switching things up. But for all of you loyal listeners, before we even get started, you can listen to this podcast on all four of the NFC East podcast feed. You can listen to it on Blogging the Boys, Bleeding Green Nation, Hogs Haven, and also on Big Blue View. And you can also watch us on YouTube, and you can also listen to us wherever you stream your podcast. But what's up, guys? First and foremost, I have a question for both of you. Is this the first time you've had a female on your show?
I guess I think so on this show.
Yeah, this show, NFC East Mixtape.
I think so. Now to be fair,
Yes,
Rachel, you are a part of all the episodes, so
I am.
so you do produce the show, and oftentimes when Brandon and I talk about something random, when Rachel sends me the file afterwards, she'll answer like the question. She'll be like, "Oh, well, my favorite ice cream flavor is this or whatever." So you are just as much a part of the show, but I do think this is the first time that a woman's voice has been heard. Can you confirm that, Brandon?
One of the rare guests in general. I mean, we don't have a ton of guests
Yeah.
That's
on the
true.
pod. We had Rick Devens before. Who else have we really had? We haven't had a ton of
Well,
guests who I can think
Ed,
of. Ed, sure,
Yeah.
but like I almost include Ed and our Hogs Haven friends Jamal and everyone like as part of the rotational members of the podcast. But Rachel is the silent member, typically a trio here of the NFC's mixtape. So it's glad to finally, I think, have the listeners hear from Rachel.
Yes. I'm happy to be here. Like I said, it's an honor. And so we have a lot of stuff that we're going to get in today. I was tasked with coming up with the list of topics to discuss. And so I'm just going to jump right into it. I wanted to start with some big news for this week. We are recording on Tuesday. You guys hear this episode on Wednesday. And some of the big news that got released, I think this was on Monday, was former Raiders quarterback Derek Carr being traded to the New Orleans Saints. And this is a $150 million deal with $100 million in total guarantees. And so this is definitely relevant to the Philadelphia Eagles for sure, because we do have uh, pick a New Orleans Saints pick when it comes to the 2024 NFL draft. And so something to monitor, but also like just relevant to the NFC in whole. And so I wanted to get both of your thoughts on this signing and how this will impact the conference.
Brandon, you go first. You've told us all year long that the Eagles hold New Orleans as draft capital, so I'm sure you're bummed because Derek Carr is amazing.
I mean, he's clearly the best quarterback in the NFC South. Now, that is not saying anything because the other quarterbacks in the NFC South currently are like Kyle Trask and who do the Panthers have? Matt Corral, Jacob Eason. If you're looking at the Bucks, I already said Trask. You're looking at Desmond Ritter
Desmond
and
Ritter,
Logan
yeah.
Woodside for the Falcons. So, obviously these teams are going to add more at that position. The Falcons have the number 8 overall pick right now. Panthers at number 9 could potentially trade up. So, a trade is in play to move up to get a quarterback. Also, maybe Lamar goes to the NFC South. I don't. I know Rachel would not be thrilled to maybe see that happen, but it's possible that there are upgrades to come in that division. But for now, I mean, just Derek Carr by far and away the best option, and also just thinking about what the Saints could realistically do this offseason because they didn't have the most cap space and because they didn't have a first round pick, their options were kind of relatively limited what they could do at quarterback. So this is probably like realistically one of the best things they could have done. Carr's coming off the second worst passer rating of his career. So, I don't think it's like he comes in and he's like an MVP candidate or anything, but I mean, he certainly gives them a really good chance to make the playoffs.
I have always kind of liked Derek Carr. Just kind of one of those dudes, and he's played for the Raiders. And I think everybody loves the Raiders, like unless you like are an AFC West team. The fraudulent AFC West mixtape lost Derek Carr, by the way. But so this kind of felt right. I mean, it just like it did make sense for everyone, for Carr, for the Saints, for Dennis Allen. I guess for the NFC South now they have some juice as far as having a quarterback is concerned, as you mentioned. It's so cool. I mean, and I'm excited. It does kind of kickstart the domino effect, right? Like where if Lamar does move, if Aaron Rodgers moves. So it's nice to see New Orleans finally. This does feel like New Orleans finally taking a step forward in the post Drew Brees world. It just has felt like they've been treading water ever since. So I'm interested in that angle. The Saints don't play the Cowboys or the Eagles in 2023, but they do play the Giants. So that's important. Obviously, the draft element is relevant as well. Raichele, you asked about rankings and because now Carr is an NFC quarterback, and obviously we care about the conference as a whole. These are John Stolnis's rankings. He tweeted them out on Monday. I was busy at jury duty and I saw this. Actually, Raichele, I was going to say you're the second BG inner to appear on the mixtape, and you beat John. So, good, good for you. You beat John to this show, but. So he said Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback on the NFC. It's a difficult thing to argue right now, whatever. Dak Prescott, number 2. Aaron Rodgers, number 3. He has Derek Carr, number 4. Is that fair? Does anybody have a hard level of disagreement there? So I'll tell you his whole top 10. Maybe that's helpful.
Yeah.
So 1 to 10, Hurts, Dak, Rodgers, Carr, Jared Goff, number 5, Kirk Cousins, the disrespect, at number 6, Matthew Stafford at 7, Justin Fields at 8, Kyler Murray at 9, and Daniel Jones, who's still lobbying for a new deal, obviously, all the way down at 10.
I think if you phrase it this way, and Raichele, let me know if you disagree. Like, how many quarterbacks are definitely better than Derek Carr? Like, how many are like head and shoulders above? Like, no brainer. You would take Hurts, you take Dak, and then it kind of. And I'm assuming Rodgers isn't going to be back in the NFC. So
Yeah,
he's there now. I get that, but like I'm just assuming he's going to be gone. There's talks this morning that he is having dialogue with the Jets, and I just really don't think he's going to be back in the NFC. So I'm kind of putting him aside for a second. And it's not that I necessarily think like Carr is by far and away the third best, but I think he's in that tier with Goff and with Cousins and those kind of quarterbacks.
I don't disagree by any means. Looking at these, like you said, Rodgers, I think that they could be interchangeable, like 3 through maybe 5. I think could fall any order, but definitely Hurts and Dak are for sure top 2. I don't know how I feel about. I guess is Daniel Jones number 10. Is that fair? Is that
I
fair?
mean, but like I think to Brandon's point, it depends how you phrase the question. Like, who's better? Who would you rather have? Like, those are two different questions to me. Like, I would honestly rather have even like Kyler Murray. Like, I'm not the biggest Kyler Murray fan, but like, there's a bit of a lotto ticket quality to him that you don't necessarily have with Daniel Jones. Now, maybe you're more conservative and you would rather have Daniel Jones. Like, again, that's more of a like pick your favorite flavor of ice cream sort of thing. But Derek Carr is a high floor. I think he's a much higher floor than a lot of these players. I would personally have Kirk Cousins at number 3. Even if Aaron Rodgers does stay. So I think Derek Carr is right around there, number 4. He's the best quarterback in his division, I mean, by far. And I think even if we start to factor in the rookies like Bryce Young or CJ Stroud or Will Levis, like wherever they wind up, it does kind of feel like they're all going to wind up in the AFC, right? Like, a lot of people think the Texans, the Colts coming away with quarterbacks. Who's the like NFC team that's walking away with one of these first round guys? Maybe the Panthers, that kind of it. I mean, like, so this is kind of the list. I mean, barring a Lamar Jackson trade to the NFC, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hope we don't see that. For sure. Go ahead, Brian.
It's hard to know what we left the 49ers out here. It's hard to know what to make of it, right? I mean, like Brock Purdy's hurt, and it's weird because in theory, like their quarterback might not be like, at the top of the list in these rankings, but they'll certainly probably somehow be a good team, or at least decent, because that's what they do. Is even if the quarterback isn't great, they still get good production there.
And I think it's interesting. You guys kind of both already touched about like how this is like the first domino to fall when it comes to like the quarterback carousel. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how things like pan out, like you said, when it comes to Lamar Jackson, who clearly feels some type of way, and just trying to see where Aaron Rodgers, lands in addition to that as well. So we're definitely going to be keeping our eyes out on this, but just knowing the fact that Carr is coming off of his worst season, like Brandon already mentioned, is just interesting. So to get the deadline is going to be today at 4 p.m. Of course, this episode is going to come out on Wednesday. So we're going to be monitoring Twitter as we're recording today because things are going to happen. And so we're going to make sure we keep you guys updated. But for all the people who listen on the regular, you guys know that we go in a specific order based off of the team that finished first in the division and so on and so on. And so we have to start with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I really, really wanted to touch on I guess also some big news from this week, Denard Wilson and the Philadelphia Eagles, parting ways, the former defensive back coach, defensive passing game coordinator. And he, like I said, they parted ways, but he wasn't out there by himself for long, because this morning it was actually reported that the Baltimore Ravens are going to come up as their defensive backs coach. And so he's going to be working with players like Marlon Humphreys, Marcus Peters, Cal Hamilton. I think that was a good signing for the Baltimore Ravens, because we know how much he deserved credit for the success that the Philadelphia Eagles defensive backs had this past season. The fact that they were top ranked in the league when it came to defenses, and also just the fact that they made it to the Super Bowl, and the number of interceptions that they had. And so he has a good relationship with the players. There's a lot that you can say. And so I would feel some type of way if I were Denard Wilson, because he was deserving. He was qualified for that position, but it didn't happen. Sean Desai got the defensive coordinator position. And so I just wanted to get both of you guys' thoughts on that. Now he's with the Ravens. It was sad to see, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of surprising from a standpoint of last year. The Eagles had the confidence in Denard Wilson and were willing to kind of have him as their defensive coordinator had they lost Jonathan Gannon to one of the teams that was rumored to potentially hire him in the 2022 hiring cycle. Didn't happen. So it just seemed like a logical thing that Wilson would be kind of the defensive coordinator in waiting had Gannon moved on, but clearly that wasn't the case. And there's some reporting out there from Marcus Hayes of the Inquirer that it wasn't necessarily that Wilson got passed over and he wanted to leave, and it was truly mutual, as much as Wilson was okay with staying, but Sirianni kind of fired him, basically, which is kind of, I think, crazy when you look at the track record of what Denard Wilson brought to the table. And it's always tough to parse these assistant coach contributions. But, I mean, you look at the fact that the Eagles had the #1 pass defense, and sure, the Eagles had a lot of talented players to work with, but I think Denard Wilson, you can easily make the case that he maximized that position. I mean, Darius Slade did not have a good year in 2020. He bounced back in 2021 and 2022, made the Pro Bowl each of those years. That was with Denard Wilson. James Bradbury got cut by the Giants, didn't have as good of a year after that Pro Bowl year. Made it to second team All-Pro for the first time, I believe, in his career under Denard Wilson. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson led the NFL in interceptions under Denard Wilson. Reed Blankenship, undrafted rookie free agent from Middle Tennessee State or wherever, comes out of nowhere to make the team and play well, and potentially be a future starter under Denard Wilson. Marcus Epps goes from being kind of a back of the roster guy to a full-time starter under Denard Wilson. So I think there's just too many examples of success there to say Denard Wilson doesn't deserve any credit for any of that. And that's why it's kind of an interesting departure for me. At the combine, Sirianni talked about, Sean Desai kind of having his own vision for the defense, and that includes kind of the coaching staff as well. He's going to want some of his own assistants. So I get that part of it. But it just seems to me, if you have someone like Wilson, who clearly landed a job very quickly, as you pointed out, Raichele, with the Ravens afterwards, and being kind of a hot commodity, just kind of weird that he's not back.
Tough scene. Hate to see it, right? I'm super bummed. I mean, to me, this feels like it was super obvious that that the Eagles were going to lose both their coordinators, right? I feel like the first week and a half following the Super Bowl loss was really chalk and really expected, and it was going to go that way, regardless of what happened in that specific game. This is I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Brandon, but this is the first whoa, we didn't budget for this. You know what I mean? This was not expected. We weren't planning this. Now we actually have to reach a little bit deeper into the barrel and kind of figure this out. And so I know we've talked a lot about regression coming for the Eagles in different ways, and that'll happen positively in different ways as well. But this is the first, I think, real, true, total challenge. And especially if it is Sirianni led, right? And that's, good for him, for whatever reason, if he feels I think Sirianni's earned his credibility. But there's a long way to go for the Eagles at this point in time. And I think you were going to see regression from the secondary in general. It was stupid, how awesome they were this past season. And so I think you're only making the job harder. But maybe that's the goal, right? Is to like, swing, veer left when everyone's veering right at this point. Like, you have to do something a little bit unconventional to defy what you're facing. You're trying to become, a lot of people think this was the best Eagles team ever assembled. So how do you defy that? How do you be even better? I mean, and again, I'm not saying he's just like putting on a tinfoil hat to try to, figure something out that nobody else can, but this feels like a legitimate and true loss that nobody was expecting. But again, that's just my perception from far away.
Yeah, and all you can do is, wish him luck. Brandon always talks about vibe check and how this past season it was good vibes for the Philadelphia Eagles, specifically with Denard Wilson, and we know all the players who have, just spoke positively about him, including Darius Slay. And so I gotta segue into this. You're right. And so a lot of people have been throwing out the idea of seeing Matt Patricia come to Philadelphia. And so should we even be entertaining this conversation? Like, what does that mean for Darius Slay? We know he doesn't have a strong relationship. He's been very vocal about not being a fan of Matt Patricia. So this is specifically for BLG.
I mean, just as recently as like leading up to the Super Bowl week, I don't know why. Maybe it was a Patriots Boston-based writer like asking Darius Slay about Matt Patricia still, and like Slay still, letting his feelings be known that he did not really like that dude. And it came down to a respect thing. And it's a really the timing of it has to be weird, right? Because as you said, Raichele, like the fact that Darius Slay would come out and kind of endorse Denard Wilson as the defensive coordinator, and then not only does he get passed over and kind of fired or whatever, mutually parted ways with in their phrasing, and then you also potentially hire Matt Patricia. Now, I will say, that report came out from a Boston-based reporter, so I don't know if there's like trying to make Matt Patricia look like a desirable candidate, so that like he creating a market for him or what. It's just very strange to me. It doesn't really fit the pattern, I think, of mostly good moves and sensible, logical moves the Eagles have made for a while now. And also, like you said, Raichele, from a vibes perspective, how is that a good vibe? Like, I get that Patricia, like, look, if he's your linebackers coach, does it really probably matter a ton? I don't think it probably does.
Oh, goodness.
Well, I mean, like, I don't think like the linebacker coach is going to make or break the season. But
I'm not trying
why
to
add someone who would be a bad vibe?
I'm not trying to interrupt, but Raichele, I'll actually ask you a question. Is it not true that if the Cowboys were connected to Matt Patricia, that BLG would be roasting them and would be saying like, "This is
I don't like it." I'm not saying it's a good move. I'm just saying it's not.
No,
like,
but there's a difference between it's not a good move
and
and like, well, how consequential is your linebackers coach? Really? Like, that's what we've like watered this down to. Like, this is a loser move. Like, if the Eagles hire Matt Patricia, this is big loser energy. Nothing about it. Like, not even just because of Darius Slay, like independent of the Darius Slay thing, it is big, massive loser energy. But like factoring in the Darius Slay thing, like you're now creating drama with one of your best players and one of your most vocal leaders. Like, why would you do that? Why would you press buttons that way? I mean, it would be a stupid, awful, terrible idea. I'm rooting for it to happen with all my heart.
Well, he also hasn't even coached linebackers since like 2010. Like,
but he has a pencil in his ear. He has a pencil in his ear.
Like Sirianni, like your favorite thing. I just like, how is this your best candidate? I guess is my question. Like, why him?
That's what I'm saying. I feel like I don't see it happening. I just don't see it happen. I don't think Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman, they know what they have going on. So unless you guys are trying to stir some drama, like that makes no sense. I don't see it happening. So it's kind of like, what's the point of entertaining the thought of it? But I had to bring it up because it's relevant. And so yes, we're going to keep on moving to the Dallas Cowboys. On Monday, the Cowboys placed the franchise tag on running back Tony Pollard. And so that franchise tag is $10.091 million. And so they have until July 17th, I think it is, in order to decide if they're going to make it like a long-term or he has to play on that franchise tag. And so I think the biggest angle that I'm looking at is like how this is going to affect Zeke. And so, of course, this conversation like starter is definitely for RJ because this is your lane.
Well, first off, I want to brag about myself because, and I think you'll both get this. It was pretty obvious that the Cowboys were going to tag Tony Pollard. So we had done a lot of pre-work at BTB, had the article pre-written, had the video ready to go, had like, TikToks and all this stuff ready. And I had just finished the pre-write stuff to get ready for jury duty. And then it happened. And it was so satisfying to like fire off all the pre-work, like to be like, we prepped for this. We were like to not be caught off guard by this. Like you've both been there. Like when something crazy happens, like when Matt Patricia is signed as the Eagles linebackers coach, you'll be in that kind of mix. So it was just a really cool feeling. But it depends on what you believe, I think, or what you're willing to believe. If you believe logic and reason, it suggests that the Cowboys are going to
The two
ask
pillars
Zeke
of Jerry
to take.
Jones.
Right. It's literally logic and reason or Jerry Jones. Like those are the two pillars involved here. The logic and reason suggests that the Cowboys are moving forward with Tony Pollard in 2023. I'm not overly pumped about the tag. I'm certainly not upset. There are some Cowboys fans. I think we've gone too far. I've said this before with the like running backs don't matter thing. The Cowboys have to add explosive players to their offense this offseason. That is the most important thing. And if they don't have Tony Pollard, they have one fewer explosive player than they already have, which is not near enough. He's projected to be ready for training camp from a health perspective. He fractured his fibula in the playoff loss to San Francisco. So all that checks out. I'm fine if they want to ride the tag out. They don't want to get the long-term deal done by July 17th. I'm super cool with that. I hope this quells the idea of Bijan Robinson at 26. That would be so dumb. I don't want anything to do with it. But as it relates to Zeke, Jerry did say at the combine on the Jerry bus on Friday night, we still see Zeke as a big part of this team. We think we can make the money work. No. I mean, like, I don't mean to come out here and disparage anybody. Like, I don't want to root against anybody. But it seems impossible to me that Zeke would be a part of this team in 2023. I can't see that happening. I tweeted this out on Monday night when I got done with jury duty and all this stuff. And it was all I'm actually looking for this, so I'm buying myself some time here. It was Dallas Cowboys running back since 2000 to average at least 3 yards after contact per rush since 2000. The top 3 seasons belong to Tony Pollard each of the last 3 years. I mean, like, I don't know why you would ever want to feed anybody but Tony Pollard the ball if you're handing the ball off. I don't buy Mike McCarthy's comments from last week about like wanting to run the ball more. I think that's posturing.
Okay.
I think, well, I mean, like, I think he wants to limit turning the ball over. I buy that. But if you look at literally a decade and a half's worth of Mike McCarthy as a play caller in Green Bay, he is obsessed with throwing the football. Tony Pollard can help you in that sense. We've seen Tony Pollard be an element in the passing game. It's just not time anymore for Zeke to be a part of this. And so I think we're a week and a half maybe away from Zeke being officially cut. Maybe people have been kind of chatting about this. The Cowboys did drag Dez out a little bit. People were really upset that they did that to him. They cut him like the week before the NFL draft in 2018, and they really limited his options because obviously everybody had signed different players. So there are people wondering how the Cowboys would handle Zeke. He did play tough with them. He held out. Everybody remembers that, obviously, going to Cabo. But yeah, I think this is Tony Pollard's backfield in 2023.
I think I've been clear on the record before that like the way the Cowboys handled their running back situation would kind of speak to me in terms of the competency of their organization right now. And I thought the move was to let Pollard hit free agency, be willing to bring him back. But I just think because of the volume of running backs in free agency, and there are a lot of like quality guys hitting the market, not to mention as well the draft having seemingly a lot of good options as well. I just thought they could kind of play this out to where they could get Pollard back on a more reasonable number. So I don't think it's the worst case scenario that you got him back on the tag because it's probably a little bit more than you had to pay. But I still think that would have been the most optimal move of resources as opposed to dedicating, $10 million on 1 year to this one position. The Zeke thing, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's not about the money to me. Like that's not, I think people are getting lost in that a little bit. It's about the usage. It's about if he's going to be on the team, he's going to have some kind of role, and that's opportunity costs. And those are touches that should be going to Pollard or whoever really else instead. So I just think like bringing him back at all is not a success, even if it's at a lower rate, even if it's at a pay cut. That he just has to be gone. Zeke has to be gone. The fact that you get Pollard back for 1 year, one more year, I think is okay. I don't think it was like an A+ kind of move.
And also, this franchise tag affects tight end Dalton Schultz as well. And so, can you touch on that a little bit, RJ?
It's funny you bring this up today. the Cowboys were never going to tag Schultz in 2023 because it would be the second year in a row. So it was going to be, was it 120% more than the first tag? So it would have been $13 million for him. And that was just never going to happen. They had discovered two great tight ends last year, two rookies. Jake Ferguson was a 4th-round pick. Peyton Hendershot was an undrafted free agent. I mentioned the way the Cowboys cut Dez. That was, like I said, the week before the NFL draft in 2018. Like right after Dez was cut, Jason Witten retired for the first time. And like 4 days after that, they drafted Dalton Schultz in the 4th round. And Dalton Schultz only even entered relevance when Blake Jarwin tore his ACL in the season opener in 2020. And Blake Jarwin was an undrafted free agent. So the Cowboys, ever since Jason Witten, have discovered tight ends in these like undrafted free agent, 4th round, whatever manners. But today, the day we're recording Tuesday, both Todd McShay and Dane Brugler mocked Dalton Kincaid, the Cowboys at 26 overall, the Utah tight end. And so everybody has really kind of accepted that Dalton Schultz has gone, Raichele. If you look at his liked tweets, if you're not blocked, he has blocked a lot of people. He is pretty displeased with the way that negotiations have gone. A lot of people think he might follow Kellen Moore to the Chargers. That would be interesting, to say the least. But it definitely feels like he'll be playing elsewhere. I just have a hard time. I actually, right before we started recording, wrote this huge article about why it would be such a terrible idea to draft a tight end in the 1st round. This draft class is super deep at tight end. There's not a huge precedent for tight ends, contributing right away. I hate the phrase win now, but this is an important season for the Cowboys. And obviously a lot of it depends on the way the board falls and all that sort of stuff. But like, Dalton Kincaid is a fine player, but just I feel like there would be many, many, many better ways to move forward at 26 overall. But yeah, Dalton Schultz isn't coming back. I can't. It's not happening. I think the more important sort of ramification is Donovan Wilson is now set to hit free agency. But a lot of people think the Cowboys might wind up bringing him back. He was an important part, obviously, of their back end last year.
And we actually talked a lot about the tight end class and just the impact that we've seen some of these tight ends have on the league, like with the Kansas City Chiefs, like with the Baltimore Ravens, like with the Falcons. We touched on this on Monday Football Monday. So lovely listeners out there, if you want to tune into that episode, you can definitely do that. But we're going to take a really, really quick break for the podcast listeners. And when we come back, we're going to get into the Washington Commanders and the New York Giants. All right, we're back. We are back. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. We are going to keep it pushing. Of course, we got to touch on the New York Giants. I'm pretty sure that's the order. Yeah, that's the order that we're going in. And so,
wow,
I had I forgot. But right now, the conversation that's going on is that both quarterback Daniel Jones and running back Saquon Barkley are in need of new deals, and so both are, I guess, candidates for the franchise tag. And so I wanted to ask both of you guys, if you were general manager Joe Schoen, how would you be approaching this?
Well, we are getting some chatter here as we head towards the deadline. This is from Albert Breer. It was 9 minutes ago. I see the Giants and Daniel Jones reps are continuing discussions in New Jersey, and a long-term deal may come down to the wire. Team started to stand its ground. We'll see if they find a middle ground. Okay. I really think they want to get this done. Shane has said he doesn't want to tag Jones. So I think that's the goal. They want to get this done. They want to tag Saquon just to get him back one more year, as opposed to having to tag Jones and then figuring out what to do with Saquon. So I think they're going to get it done. I think the Jones and the Giants are going to come to an agreement here. And it might be a little bit more than the Giants want to pay. It seems like they don't want to be in that 40 million number, which is, by the way, is like top 8 quarterback money. But I think that's just kind of what they're going to have to do in the bed they've made. And I think they're going to end up tagging Saquon.
I think it's so dumb. I think it's actually dumb that people still don't understand the way the quarterback market works. Oh, Daniel Jones is not as good of a quarterback as so-and-so. Who cares? Welcome to the world of supply and demand. He has something that they need desperately. And, actually, by the time this goes out, we'll know. So I think we all
right.
So Brandon, your guess is there's a new long-term deal in place, right? I'm going to guess that he's been tagged. What is your guess?
Wow.
You're saying by 4 p.m.?
Yeah. So like when everyone's listening to this on Wednesday, do you think he's tagged or he has a new deal?
I'm gonna say he's tagged. Yeah.
There you go.
Like,
It's because like teams want to do like, well, you're not as good as Patrick Mahomes. Who cares? Like, can you sign Patrick Mahomes right now? No. Can you who can you sign? Who are you going to sign? New York Giants. You can't even sign Geno Smith, right? Like Geno got the extension as well. Like, who's the best non-Daniel Jones quarterback that's available on the open market right now? Who? Like I mean, like what, Jimmy Garoppolo? You know what I mean? Like if you're the Giants, is that what you're going to do? Like you're going to move forward with Jimmy Garoppolo if you don't get this done with Daniel Jones? And so Daniel Jones has every reason in the world to say, I want 45 million a year. Why should Daniel Jones settle and say, oh, you know what? I'm not as good as so-and-so. Like
Right.
I'm just going to take whatever, like for this reason. Like, and if I was Saquon too, I'd be like, dude, get your bag. Like you worked for this. Like they're rooting for each other. Obviously, I do think we have maybe underscored how important this is for both the Eagles and the Cowboys. Because obviously Jalen Hurts is eligible for an extension for the first time this offseason. Dak Prescott is likely going to get an extension and have a rework deal to, alleviate some salary cap stuff. And so the market is going to only continue to rise. We started this episode talking about Derek Carr. Do y'all remember that Derek Carr was at one point in time the highest paid quarterback in NFL history at just $25 million a year? Like that was what, like 2017, 2018, something like that. I mean, like it is never, you're never going to get a bargain ever. You are never going to run into the quarterback who says, you know what, Raichele, I'm cool. I'll take less because I just feel like it. That will never, ever happen.
Yeah, that's not really what happens at all. And even a quarterback who might be a bargain now, like Jared Goff, because you look at what he kind of produced relative to what he's making, and part of that was because of the trade in there. And the the Lions aren't on the hook for like all the guaranteed money that the Rams were. They're probably going to adjust that. And even with Mahomes, who signed this big deal that kind of ended up being really, I think, team friendly in the end because of the length of it and everything.
He's
I
underpaid.
Yes, but I feel like I could be wrong. I feel like an adjustment is probably coming for him this offseason because he just won another Super Bowl. They're probably going to tweak some things a little bit. The point is, I think there isn't a true bargain at the quarterback position.
So, just to use Dak as an example, because that's brought up all the time. Do either of you know how much Dak makes a year? Like this gets made up to be like, oh my God, Dak makes $40 million a year as it currently stands. And everybody, he's tied with Matthew Stafford technically. There are 6 quarterbacks ahead of them. So and that was just 2 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like you feel like, oh my gosh, like we're going to be trapped. No, it's like driving a car off the lot. It literally starts to depreciate because everybody else is starting to come in. We're not even at the point yet where, like I said, Jalen Hurts is going to get his big time extension. Joe Burrow is eligible for an extension. Justin Herbert's eligible for an extension. Like Lamar. The price is like, so if you're the Giants, yeah, I would hope for their sake they get it done. Like they have to. And you cannot be worried about well, what happens if we don't do it? The Eagles and the Rams are examples. Like pay them, and then if it doesn't work out, get out of it. Be creative. Like don't be afraid of this stuff.
And it is exciting for him because look what he just did this past season. We don't know how he's going to do this upcoming season, but he made some strides. And so, if I were the Giants, I definitely would get it done with him because why not? Like he did good this season.
I think it does have the potential to be an albatross, which I agree with. Here's the thing: if you're a smart organization, you shouldn't fear. If you think you're a smart organization, and I think a lot of teams do think they're smart, which that isn't true for everyone, then you should have confidence. Yes, we can navigate this in a worst case scenario. I do think there is that downside there with Daniel Jones, because I don't think he's proven it beyond the shadow of a doubt that he's worth this elite money, and it could age poorly. But I think the reality is it's not going to be a disaster contract as much as it kind of just might be a Kirk Cousins kind of middle of the road problem that you're kind of just stuck in there, that you're he's fine, but he's not great.
I'm just my last thing here. Even if it is Kirk Cousins middle of the road, or what did you say? Was it middle of the road? The Vikings signed Kirk Cousins in 2018. Okay. So again, if you just want to play that game, since 2018, the Vikings 8 wins, 10 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins, 13 wins. They've been a playoff team twice. They won their first playoff game with Kirk Cousins against the New Orleans Saints. Have they won a Super Bowl? No. Have they been to a conference championship? No. But that's not a failure. He came in and helped you be competitive. So if Daniel Jones helps you be competitive, you're winning at least 8 games every single season. You've got multiple playoff appearances. He already has a playoff appearance and a win over these exact Vikings. That is people assign that to be a failure because they live in these extremes. Well, they didn't win a Super Bowl. They're a bunch of losers. No, man. If you're knocking at the door every single year, that's worth paying for in my mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was all I had for the Giants. Did either of you guys want to touch on anything? I know they made some like coaching changes, but other than that, like, did you guys want to touch on anything else related to the Giants?
My only thing is we started a Madden franchise series on our YouTube channel, and I beat the Giants last week. So shout out to me.
Nice, 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 nice. But we're gonna keep it moving. Of course, now we're going to go to the Washington Commanders. I thought this was hilarious. I saw this, so I had to include it in today's conversation. And so at the XFL, like the DC Defenders XFL game at Audi Field this past weekend, there was an erupt that, happened amongst the fans, and they were all like chanting pretty much like F Dan Snyder. And so we already know like where this organization is. They are definitely in need of new ownership because he sucks. And so it's time for him to sell the team. But it was just crazy to see. I don't know if all the listeners have seen the videos. Those were going around. The beer snake videos were going around and stuff. And so I just thought that was hilarious. And so I just wanted to get both of your thoughts on that. I mean, this is time for the Commanders.
I mean, it's kind of cool that fans are like that, organized, right? Like even at other events, like I don't know if they're doing that like at Wizards games or something or Capitals games. But it makes sense. I mean, like I feel like, like these are different things, but like Brandon doesn't like Kirk Cousins as an example, right? But like there is something that Brandon can say that is a redeeming quality for Kirk Cousins, right? Like Kirk Cousins is average to above average at this. What is there for Dan Snyder? Like what is the thing? Like what is the thing that they have going on that like you can be like at least, like again,
No,
not apples to
nothing.
apples, but like if people are pissed the Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl in 30 years or whatever. Like, and I'm not bragging about what I'm about to say, but it's like, well, they're the most valuable franchise in the world, right? Like they're the most valuable sports team in the world. They're competitive, whatever. Like they have something that you can at least say is a positive thing. What has Dan Snyder overseen? And it feels like everybody connected to him goes down with the ship. Where were the like other minority investors that he like dragged out in public last week? Like who is in his inner circle that has not been indicted or implicated or like thrown into the mud with all of this? The stadium falls apart, the uniforms and the team name and everything's bad. Like everything about what they do, the reveal of it all, the Sean Taylor, like we could sit here for like hours and hours and hours. Like what do they have? The best thing about the Commanders is their fans and how they have banded together against the franchise.
Yeah, I think the way we phrase it a lot is like something to hang your hat on, and there's just nothing there. It does seem, apparently, according to reports, that the finalists to buy the Commanders are Bezos and Josh Harris, who also owns the Sixers, as we've talked about here on the podcast before.
Do you think that's weird, Raichele? Because Brandon is like torn up about this.
I'm torn up about it. I just think it's a weird vibe.
Do you think it's weird that the owner of the Sixers could own?
Yeah,
you do think it's weird? Why? He doesn't own the Eagles.
I know, but it's still like the city. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though they're two different sports, I get it. But at the same time, like, I feel like, especially because Philly, the fan base is so passionate, I would feel some type of way. Like the Commanders, out of all teams, because most of the 76er fans, I'm assuming, are Eagles fans. And so isn't that kind of like a torn situation,
They also play literally right across from each other. You know what I mean? It's not like some of these other cities where the venues are separate, which I think creates its own kind of atmosphere, and you have that separation. Like they're everything is so tied into together. It's the only sports city in America that has like all four major teams like that close to each other, like they do. So I think there is something to be said for that. But that being said, I would rather Josh Harris buy the Commanders than Bezos, because I think Bezos is the thing that scares me because of just the like crazy spending power that he would bring to that team. Not to say that Josh Harris wouldn't also be able to spend more and probably certainly be an upgrade over Snyder, but I just think the degree that Bezos could be compared to Harris or anyone else, that kind of scares me. So that's what I'm rooting against. But I think it would be the best thing for the Commanders.
And I did see that this is in regards to the stadium. I know like the stadium is definitely trash. I live in Maryland and I know I'm not a fan of this. But I saw a report from Front Office Sports and they were saying that there's a possibility of returning to RFK, which is like the old stadium, which they are like in the process of, I guess, trying to tear down. I know they removed like all of the seats in the stadium, and so there's a possibility that they're going to go back because that's technically in DC. That is in DC. So that's something to keep an eye out on in the NFL owners meeting. Is also at the end of March, like March 26th. And so, in regards to everything that's happening with Dan Snyder, I'm sure you guys are going to continue to touch on this in the upcoming episodes of the NFC East Mixtape. The last thing I wanted to touch on, just for fun, was last week they released the different NFLPA report card grades. And so, based off of those grades, the Philadelphia Eagles were ranked number 14 overall. The Cowboys finished 5th. The Giants finished 8th. And the Commanders finished dead last. And so were you guys surprised by these? Of course, they were, for the listeners, the grades were based off of 8 different categories. It was like treatment of families, weight room, strength coaches, food service, nutrition, training room, training staff, locker room, and team travel. So were you surprised by where each of these teams fell?
I thought it was really cool to get that level of transparency
Yeah.
on and like on the detail things. Like I'm glad it wasn't just like a general, grade or something. Like it was cool to see the, kind of tiny little things. As just an example, most Cowboys players live in Dallas or live in Frisco during the off season and work out at the team facility. And so like as Cowboys fans, we're just kind of like, you assume that's par for the course. You see a lot of these guys, they, in the offseason, they moved to wherever, like LA or whatever, and they train at different places. And I've always like wondered, like, well, why wouldn't they like stay there? Right. Like at least like, dudes who have like long-term contracts or whatever, like why would you uproot yourself or whatever? And now it makes sense, right? Like it makes sense if like the workout facility is too small or whatever, like the Cowboys, obviously spare no expense for stuff like that. So that was very cool to see. Very weird to see the Cowboys not necessarily work well with players' families or have great travel. So it was kind of random how some of these things were like exemplary and some of these things were on the other end of the spectrum. Obviously, it was super chalk that the Commanders were terrible at everything. But I was kind of shocked that the Eagles were a little bit, down. I felt like the Giants had like a really respectable grade. Like they were just kind of B all the way through. Like they're just pretty solid. Like it seems like a pretty pleasant experience to play for the Giants.
Yeah, I think some of those categories that you mentioned, no one really graded out too well, and so I
Yeah.
think that's sort of that is just like the standard or the expectation. But I think it's great. I mean, shout out to the players union for doing something that I think can be really helpful and transparent while also being, I think, like fair. It's not just like, it doesn't come off as just like oh, we need everything and like trying to be harsh. It's just like an objective kind of, it's a poll. It's here it is. Here's the comparison. So I think that was really a great move by them to put it out there. And yeah, I think the Eagles graded lower than you would expect in some areas. And I think I will give them some of the benefit of the doubt in the time being in terms of like, hey, learn from this. Like this is you have been kind of put on notice. Now let's see if that improves down the road. And if it does, then great. And that's fair. And if it doesn't, if it continues to be a problem, then it's like, this is an area that probably needs to be addressed. I do think it was interesting how the Eagles got such high grades in the training staff and everything. And maybe that speaks to some kind of like something being there with how they were able to stay healthier. The fact that, the players are feeling fresh and they're liking that is a good sign, maybe. And the other thing is that I think when it comes to maybe the facilities, people would be surprised that they were a little bit lower than expected. And I think part of that's just because like the NovaCare complex like, was new once upon a time and the link was new once upon a time, but like, it's not. It's not anymore. Like it's been a while, and that's not to say they need a complete overhaul. But maybe it is time to kind of consider like the future and thinking about these things. And I want to give credit to the Cowboys here. I mean, like I've said that consistently in the past. That's the one thing I think Jerry Jones gets right. He gets all the off the field stuff, like having the best press box spread. Like he gets all those kind of things because that's the easy stuff to get right. That just takes money. That doesn't take like knowing football necessarily. That just takes like, hey, like spend money and do the easy things well. And that by contrast, that's something Snyder just gets so wrong.
I would say too, I mean, I think people make too big of a deal of stuff like this, like, oh, there's no state income tax. Like he's definitely going to consider like whatever. And like, it's like, dude, I mean, like obviously that's a factor, but it's not, it's not like the end all be all or whatever. But like, it does make a difference, right? Like if you go to work and you like the place you're working, like it makes sense, like wanting to get out of a certain situation. I remember when Cole Beasley left the Cowboys in free agency and went to the Bills. I don't have the Bills grades off the top of my head right here, but he was like, these facilities are incredible. And every Cowboys fan was like, what? Like every Cowboys fan was like, what are you talking about, dude? Like like, and not only the idea that like Buffalo could have these like world-class facilities, but that like anything could be better than Dallas. But obviously Buffalo is spoken of highly. Minnesota has a really kind of similar situation to the Star. And to your point, Brandon, I mean, the Cowboys, they literally have a freaking campus. Like that is what it is. Like there's a hospital there, like there's a hotel there. And that's, you know, when they have their 30 visits or whatever, like they literally put players up in their hotel that is connected to everything. And so, yeah, I mean, it makes everything cool. I would be interested in seeing, you know, players grade like quality of life. Like maybe they, you know, maybe an Eagle thinks it's cool to have all the major sports teams be in the same area. And like, I don't know, like I like the name that comes to mind is Bryce Harper. I know it's not a good example, but like how he became an Eagles fan after moving to Philly. Like I wonder what like that kind of effect is. But I did think, my last thought on the survey, it was cool that there was some legitimate accountability. And the example I thought it was the Cardinals and how they had to like pay for their meals. Like it was very cool to see that information be public and have like Michael Bidwell have to answer to that. It's like, why are you making your players pay for lunch, dude? I mean, like that's a ridiculous thing to happen if you're an NFL team.
I agree. I loved it. I hope that they continue to do it. Because like you said, it does give us fans like insight. I know like BLG, you get to go to the game, so you kind of get to see what these facilities and just a different side. You get to see an inside look, but so that other fans like we have no idea. So I hope they continue to do this. It was really nice to see. And so that's all I had. Did you guys have any more topics before we wrap things up?
I think we need something random. Like we need like a random cherry on top. Like what is like you have to have like a random question for us, Raichele. It's your episode. That's my only request is like a random food, life, TV, something related question topic.
A random topic. I feel like you guys talk about food all the time. Like you got
wow.
Oh, it's fun because everybody can relate. I'm just trying to think of something you haven't touched on because you touch on so many different things. I suck at this kind of stuff.
Okay, Raichele, what is your favorite dessert? Like you go to you're at a nice restaurant. What are you hoping they have on the menu? Dessert specifically.
Dessert. I feel like a nice cheesecake is a good dessert.
Yes, great answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
You going fork or spoon?
Ooh, spoon.
Wow.
That's the right answer. That's the right answer.
Want no berries. I don't want like the berries and the stuff because you know how you can get like a strawberry cheesecake. I don't like that kind of stuff. I kind of just want either plain or like vanilla bean, like whatever the flavor is. Don't add the extra stuff.
Perfect.
I don't like
answer.
fruit chunks in my kind of desserts for the most part. Not a big apple pie guy. Like I just don't like fruit chunk. I don't like that kind of thing for the most part. There are exceptions to the rule, but definitely a cheesecake for me as well. I'd probably go fork, I gotta say, but I'm not really whatever. I'm not really married to that. It's fine. I
want anything with like graham crackery crust. Like if there's like a crunchy kind of crust, I'm cool with whatever it is. My actual last question, I was talking about this with my wife. We were talking about almonds and stuff, and she brought up like pecans, and then she brought up hazelnuts. Have either of you ever seen a hazelnut? Like does it exist, or is it just like a flavor like for coffee?
Yeah, right. Just a flavor for coffee.
Flavor.
She said it's real. She was like, people eat hazelnuts, and I was like,
well, obviously it's real, but it's just not.
I was like, nobody eats hazelnuts. Nobody eats hazelnuts in real life.
Never.
So
they kind of look like acorns, I feel like, but a little bit.
They do. I mean, I always hear people talk about the spread, like the Nutella. Isn't that like a hazelnut?
Yes. Yes.
So many people eat that.
Yeah,
but like nobody's like cracking the hazelnuts and eating them. That's my point.
Not that I know of. But yeah, that's all I have today. So thank you for letting me come on the show. This was a lot of fun. And I hope
rock,
the listeners
Raichele on Twitter at Raichele Monique. Everybody follow her and tweet her your thoughts on forks or spoons for cheese.
Nice.
With the hashtag what, Brandon?
Hashtag. I'm really choking here. I can't think of it. Hashtag mix it up mixtape.
Ooh.